So I have two different hats that I wear. One is that I coordinate a group of funders called the Funders Workgroup for Sustainable Production and Consumption, which Tides via Kathy Lerza is a member of. This is a group of funders who are interested in studying and getting involved in making change about the environmental, health, and social impacts of how we make, use, and throw away all this stuff in our lives. Because of that role, I've been thinking a lot about how to translate all the information like that we just heard into advice or guidance for funders. What can funders do to not just be overwhelmed by the severity of the situation, but to be more effective change agents? So I'd like to share some of that with you today. I have another hat also, which is that I made a little film with the great help of the Tides Foundation called The Story of Stuff. I'm wondering if, have many people seen it here? If you haven't seen it, it's about stuff and how we make and use and throw away stuff. And you can see it at storyofstuff.com. I also have some DVDs with me here today, so if you want one, please come talk to me afterwards. I just want to really give a sincere hats off to Tides for first coming up with the idea to make the film. It's based on a live talk that I do, and I will never forget when Idali said, "You should make a film of that." And I said, who would want to watch a film about the materials economy? Well, it turns out a lot of people. In the 7 months since we launched this film online, we have had over 3.5 million views. We are still getting 10,000 new views a day. You can go onto Google Analytics and see a map of the world and actually see a dot where everyone has seen it. And I was scrolling my mouse. I cannot find a country in which it has not been seen. Like Congo, Chad, Burma, everywhere. It is just totally amazing. In addition to the number of views, we've been floored by the number of emails that we have gotten. Over 30,000 people have signed up online or emailed us to share with us really heartfelt stories about how the film has affected them. And I found these email responses really illuminating to sort of the mindset of where people are on these issues. They're very diverse. There's a huge number of people that have emailed us who said they've never thought about any of this and they wouldn't have even watched the film if they knew what it was about. But that it caused some light bulb to go off to get them to start to rethink about the impacts of the materials in their life and their own relationship to materials. We've also gotten lots of emails from people who say they worked on some piece of the issue for decades, indigenous rights or forest protection or worker health issues or recycling, some piece of it, but they didn't realize the connections. They didn't realize the systemic nature of the problems. We're getting lots of teachers emailing us, and so we're actually working on developing a curriculum for teachers to use it in their schools. It's already being used in hundreds and hundreds of schools around the country and world. Lots of faith-based groups, Unitarians, Catholic churches. We can't believe how many checks we've got from nuns who want copies of it that are using it. Also, we've gotten about 700 requests for translations. We've gotten a huge number of emails from kids. I have a whole following of 12 to 14-year-olds now. Just as an example, there's a school in Palestine using it, a street theater in South Africa, Austria's official development aid agency, the Pan American Health Organization in Argentina. It is every day we get these phenomenal responses. So clearly we struck a nerve, which got me to thinking hard. I've had the tremendous opportunity to be able to talk to and a lot of these people who are contacting us and reading all these emails, and it's got me thinking hard about what are some lessons learned that I learned in making and disseminating this film and communicating with all these people. What are some lessons about the state and needs of the movement today? So I'm developing a set of sort of observations about the movement for sustainable production and consumption, and I'm working on a white paper with some observations and specifically implications for funders. I don't have time to go into them all now, so if you're interested in continuing this conversation, please talk to Kathy Lerza or myself afterwards. But I want to share with you 3 core observations that I've realized about the state of the work today and the implications for funders. So one of the first things that I've realized is that the time for seriously addressing these issues is now. The time is now in 2 ways. One is in terms of the environmental reality. When I was going back and updating the footnotes on the story of stuff, and so I went to look up all these statistics about forestries and fisheries and climate and water, it was a very sobering experience. On every single issue, the statistics were worse. The reports say consensus of scientists, warn of critical crisis, impending disaster, collapse. Like, we're seriously at an ecological brink across the spectrum of issues. But the other reason I think that the time is now is I feel that people are ready. People are really, really ready to have the harder conversations. I feel like with the story of stuff, we inadvertently took the temperature of the public and found that people are ready for change. So why are people ready for change now? Part of it is the higher visibility that environmental issues are getting in the mainstream press. But I think there's something deeper that the story of stuff tapped into. I think that there's a growing dis-ease among the public that something is not working right. From the price of gasoline, to toxic umbilical cords, to not feeling safe letting your kids play outside in front of the house, to the emptiness that follows a day spent trolling the mall. There's something deeply wrong on many levels. The way I see it is, we're trashing the planet, we're trashing each other, and we're not even having fun. Now, if it were fun, we might want to think of some way to prop up this unsustainable system a little longer, but it's not even fun, so why bother? And that growing sense of dis-ease, I feel like gives us a better opening to connect with people who might not immediately care about Appalachia or Canadian tar sands, but they know in their own lives it's simply not working. Yet sadly, the best thing that many NGOs and publications offer the public are these silly little 10 simple things you can do to save the planet list. And lists of 10 simple things just won't cut it. Changing light bulbs and recycling and buying organic is all good, and of course we should do that. But it isn't commensurate with the scale of the problem. And you know that, and then the public knows it. My sense is that people are ready for more now. So the funding implication of this is that it is not the time to be timid, to hold ourselves back. I'd suggest that now more than ever is the time to aim for bigger changes, to be bold, to take risks. Because really the most dangerous path of all is to keep doing what we're doing and keep getting what we're getting. Yes, progress is happening. Great work, like we heard about at this conference, is happening, but the bigger picture is bleak. As Donella Meadows once said in reference to the environmental progress that we're making is great, we're losing at a slower rate these days. We need to up the bar, we need to give more, we need to give courageously, and we need to give more creatively. So the second observation I had in looking at the current work on these issues these days is that there is both more and more effective work happening on the quality of what we consume rather than the quantity of what we consume. There's strong movements to promote recycled, FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certified wood, organic and fair trade certified products, PVC and mercury-free toys and medical devices, and lots of other really excellent campaigns, often market campaigns, to address the quality, the toxicity of what we're consuming and what we're producing and consuming. Now, those campaigns are great. We need to keep supporting them. They save forests, they protect workers, they protect babies. But there's far less work and even far less discourse on the quantity of what we consume. And that's a problem because we're consuming too much and we're not sharing it equitably. Even if all the stuff that we consumed was toxics-free, we'd still have some major problems. So why is there much more and more effective work happening on the quality of what we consume rather than the quantity? I have a number of theories on this. One is that there are more short-term wins available on the quality side. You know, get PVC out of lunchboxes, get lead out of lipstick, get neurotoxins out of kids' pajamas. So if we're looking for short-term wins, rather than be willing to sign up for the much slower prodding towards deeper systemic change, quality campaigns deliver. And so as funders, one of the things that funders can do is not just look at short-term wins, but look at, are these campaigns really contributing to longer-term systemic change? Another reason that more work is happening on quality than quantity is that it's easier to talk about the quality of what we consume rather than the quantity. Quality work immediately appeals to a consumer's self-interest because you're talking about getting toxics out of their products. Like, who wants lead in their lipstick and neurotoxins in their kids' pajamas? So you have a ready audience. Talking about quality is safer than talking about the quantity. One can talk about the quality of what we consume without touching on the deeper issues of equity, of how our unsustainable lifestyle is dependent on others abroad and here not having enough. Remember that the US has 5% of the world's population and consumes 30% of the world's resources and makes 30% of the world's waste. And even within the US, there are vast discrepancies in consumption rates. 13 million kids go to bed hungry in the United States every night, and that number is still growing. So once we talk about the quantity of what we consume, we have to address issues of equity, of social justice, and even the very foundation of our growth at all costs economic model. So that's a lot scarier. But you know what? It's also a lot more effective. And that's because we don't have just an environmental problem. We have an environmental problem, a public health problem, a social justice problem, a governance problem, and an equity problem. And the more that we can articulate and address these problems as interrelated, the stronger our movements will be and the more strategic our interventions can be. And that's one of the strongest feedbacks I've gotten from the Story of Stuff, is that people have flooded our email boxes with congratulations for highlighting the connections between these issues and beginning to break down the silos so that we can evolve our work from being lists of really cool campaigns into being a more integrated movement for transformational change. So the funding implication for that is to keep supporting the groups doing good quality work, because it's enormously important to get toxics out of our products, to promote sustainably harvested wood and other materials. But at the same time, we've got to start addressing issues around the quantity of what we consume, not just the quality. Many of the groups that are working on the quality of what we consume have decades of credibility and trust with the public built. We should leverage that infrastructure if they're interested and support them even further to begin to work on issues related to the quantity of what we consume. So the third observation that I wanted to share is that in the US, more than any other place I see, we have two different sort of self-identities. One is the identity of a consumer, and one is the identity of a citizen. Now, I go around the world, actually, and give this Story of Stuff talk live or show the film. And in the US, more than any other place, one of the first questions I get, someone invariably raises their hand and says, "What can I buy differently to solve this problem?" Now, I'm curious about this. And what the theory that I've come up with is that our consumer piece of our self-identity is overdeveloped and the citizen piece has atrophied. that from a very early age in this country, we receive more training on being a good consumer than on being an engaged citizen. US corporations spend billions of dollars a year training us in consumerism. The citizen muscle is atrophied. School curriculums, entertainment, and many other aspects of life increasingly have a consumer element. I'm sure you've seen those studies about kids can recognize corporate logos before they can recognize letters of the alphabets, and adults can recognize far more corporate logos than elected public officials. We know the time and locations of the best bargain shopping in our communities, but we don't know the basic structures of our democracy anymore. Now, this is one of the trends that most scares me because it's self-perpetuating. It's like that nonlinear relationship in climate change. When you get to a certain point, it just keeps going by itself. I think it's the same thing with the erosion of our civic engagement. And the reason is that as our consumer self gets overdeveloped, we're spending more and more time further feeding that. We're spending more hours working and shopping than ever before. And for those of you who know the Story of Stuff, the two activities that we spend the bulk of our leisure time on is watching TV and shopping. So as our time spent working, shopping, and watching TV increases, that time has to come from somewhere. Where it's coming from is we're spending less time engaged in communities and engaged in civic activities. So we're seeing an erosion in our communities and our civic life because we're investing in them less. So then lots of things that the community and civic life used to provide, logistical things like a ride to the airport, help moving, child care, or emotional things, someone to talk to when you're blue, or a sense of being something larger than yourself, a sense of meaning. All of these things that the community and civic engagement used to provide, they're not providing it anymore, so they're being commodified, so we have to go out and work more to shop and buy these things. We have to pay for these things that our neighbors used to provide. We have to demonstrate our meaning by having the latest logo or the coolest car, and so it's becoming a self-replicating downward spiral. And the reason it scares me is that we need civic engagement and strong communities now more than ever if we're going to turn this around. So one of the things that I would suggest to funders is that we add another lens to our grant-making criteria, and that is, does this project help re-engage people in civil society? Does it help build an active living democracy? And in a sense, I don't even care what issue it is, if it's getting greenways for safe transportation or working for farmers market or any of these issues, just we gotta get people back involved in civic engagement, because I don't think there's anything that's gonna help more in the coming years than a reinvigorated, re-engaged, and re-inspired civil society in this country. The way I see it is that we are going to transition to a more sustainable society inevitably. We're either going to transition by design or by default. And if we do it by design, it's going to require an engaged, informed, active civil society to lead the way. It's still going to be hard. It's still going to be disruptive and cause a lot of transition. But if we do it by design, we can be more intelligent and mindful about it. If we do it by default, I'm worried there's going to be a lot of casualties along the way and really massive inequity in terms of who bears the brunt. So we're going that way towards more sustainability regardless. We're running out of oil. You know, across the spectrum, all the ecological indicators show us that we can't continue on this path. But what I would say is that the more we can engage people in a living democracy, the more we can make sure that we do it by design rather than default. That's it.